Don't get nervous just because I'm pulling a script and putting my glasses on. So, but good afternoon, everyone. As chair of the Metropolitan Community College's Board of Governors, I want to extend you a warm welcome to the 38th annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. This is the first time the celebration has met in person since January of 2020. So after 3 years, I think it's good to be back. Very excited to welcome everyone back and hope you enjoy your time together. I also want to extend a warm welcome to the audience members who are joining us via Zoom. Thanks to the technical staff who are making this hybrid presentation possible. I believe there's someone actually coming in from Africa to join us on this. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., America's preeminent advocate of nonviolence and one of the greatest leaders in world history, shared a dream that has inspired our nation and world to bring justice where there is injustice, freedom where there is oppression, peace where there is violence, and opportunity where there is poverty. Metropolitan Community College plays an active role in the fulfillment of Dr. King's dream. Our mission, the delivery of relevant student-centered education to a diverse community of learners, is the basis. Path Forward initiatives remove barriers to student success and help all students persist to completion. We engage the community, students, faculty, and staff through strong and sustainable partnerships, programs, and growth opportunities. We focus on internal operations and infrastructure to support the success of students, faculty, and staff. And we plan for future stability and growth to ensure the institution fulfills its mission to the students and to the community. Living up to Dr. King's dream requires more than just reflection. Dr. King stated, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action." On behalf of the Metropolitan Community College Board of Governors, work with us towards Dr. King's dream, and thank you for joining us again.
Thank you, Chair Yuhi. Again, I am James Hawthorne, MCC's Director of Veterans Upward Bound. I too am excited to be in person with our audience today and to serve as your Master of Ceremonies. Doesn't it just feel good to be here in person? I would like to thank you for taking the time to remember and honor the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy. For those of you connecting virtually, we are so pleased that you could join us today. Watch the chat function of our Zoom screen for important messages. You may also send questions through the chat to MCC Tech. James Weldon Johnson composed the lyrics of "Lift Every Voice and Sing." This song, originally composed in the 1900s to celebrate the birth of Abraham Lincoln, is commonly known as the Black National Anthem. "Lift Every Voice and Sing" was entered into the congressional record as the official African-American national hymn following the success of a rendition by singer Melba Moore and bevy of other recording artists. We welcome Miss Kathy Tyree, known as Omaha's Queen of Soul, but also the Director of Inclusion and Community Engagement at the Omaha Community Playhouse. Kathy and Minister Ananias Markey Montague, the Minister of Music and Fine Arts at the Salem Baptist Church, will perform "Lift Every Voice and Sing." Feel free to join in singing this powerful hymn. The lyrics will be shown on the screens.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastising rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over a way with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood and the slaughter, out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of a bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, though who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us unto the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee, shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
At this time, please feel free to open your box lunches and you can consume those as we move forward with our program. Thank you so very much, Ms. Tyree and Minister Montague, and thanks to the audience for joining in the singing of this important historical hymn. I would like to recognize our special guests in the conference room today. Once again, thank you to the members of Metropolitan Community College's Board of Governors who are in attendance. Again, our chair, Mr. Fred Uhie. We also have Ms. Linda McDermott, Kristen Dupree, and Ron Hugg. M6C executive team staff, please stand as well to be recognized. Thank you. MCC Board of Governors student ex officio Conrad Cusick is in attendance along with other members of our Student Advisory Council. If you would please stand. Thank you. Student Support Services Trio program has been at Metropolitan Community College for over 30 years. These federally funded grant programs were established by the Department of Education to remove barriers which deter the progress of first-generation and low-income students from attaining a college education. Welcome to all the attendees, including students, participants, and staff from Upward Bound Math and Science. If you would please stand. Veterans Upward Bound Trio, if you would please stand. And Student Support Services, if you would please stand. Thank you. Metropolitan Community College is offering a new social justice pathway transfer degree. Students who want to study social justice and pursue related careers have a new transfer pathway to guide them to completion of a bachelor's degree at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. The MCC Social Justice Pathway provides a specific course of study that aligns with UNO's Bachelor of Science in Sociology, specializing in inequality and social justice concentration. Students can complete 61 credit hours of the 120-hour credit requirement here at Metropolitan Community College. Visit the Student Service office at any of our Metro campuses to learn more. At this time, I would like to welcome MCC President, Mr. Randy Schmazel, and Dr. Cynthia Gooch Grayson, Associate Vice President for Equity and Inclusion, to join us for the special presentation.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. In honor of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Metropolitan Community College recognizes individuals whose endeavors honor the civil rights pioneer who dared to dream. Our first awardee today is recognized for serving, preserving, nurturing, and teaching togetherness. This person is a native of Omaha whose family migrated north in the 1940s during the Great Migration. She credits her Southern roots and family history for giving her context and embodying the meaning of the themes of hospitality, community, and relationship invariably present in her work. In her youth, the art of manipulating fabric fascinated her. She has fond early memories of spending hours upon hours playing with fabric and materials. Quilting is in her blood. Today, she is carrying on those traditions from her grandmother. She watched her mother, godmother, grandmother, and women in her neighborhood sew, quilt, and crochet, and learned until she was able to recreate designs that she saw in stores and design her own the way that they did. Whether the barrier was segregation or financial barriers, they could create magic out of material. She sees her fabric textile art as a way of paying homage to those women who broke down barriers in fashion and in life. Eventually, she realized that quilts were the original version of social media, sending messages with every finished masterpiece. Her parents also encouraged her to explore artistic mediums, amplifying the significant role that art had in her life. Today, she employs her artistic talent to educate and outreach in communities, significantly making impact in Omaha and beyond. She states, "With my hands, I gather, preserve, and patiently stitch together the stories of my people." She has worked on several community engagement art projects, celebrating the pride and culture of North Omaha, and collaborating with mothers who have lost their children to violence, developing set designs, and much, much more. Participating with in-school artists and residences by working with children right down the street at Nelson Mandela School in Saratoga, she teaches the next generation the art of quilting and storytelling. In 2018, she created quilts in honor of Nelson Mandela for the centennial celebration of his birth for the Nelson Mandela Elementary School. She continues to work on community engagement projects as an artist, lecturer, teacher, and celebrating the pride and culture of North Omaha, including leading a morning walk with the guided conversation on the North Omaha Trail. She has collaborated with many individuals, educational institutions, and organizations. Here at Metropolitan Community College, she has created a quilt featuring Langston Hughes for one of our Black History Month kickoffs and has presented on campus multiple times. She's led workshops at the National African American Quilt Convention with 2 of her quilts featured. Her work has been widely exhibited locally, nationally, and internationally, including the Washington Post, We Don't Coast, and Omaha Inspired Living. In addition to numerous exhibitions, her artistry is in several public and private collections, including the world-renowned coach and author Iyanla Vanzant, the Women's Center for Advancement, and the Union for Contemporary Art, just to name a few. She has been a fellow at the Union for Contemporary Art and participated in the Kent Bellows Artist Mentoring Program and Omaha's Y Arts Artists in Residence Program. Today, Metropolitan Community College recognizes Omaha's well-known fiber and textile artist and quiltologist and storyteller, Ms. Celeste Butler, for her artistic advocacy that builds community and contributes to the masterpiece of Dr. King's dream. Ms. Butler, would you come join us? Surprise. And if you're fortunate to drive just 1 block south of 24th, 1 block north of 24th and Lake, there's a beautiful mural with her image on the north side of the building.
I had no idea. My daughter tricked me. I'm just supposed to be here for lunch. But I just want to thank you for letting me serve. And I appreciate everyone who has worked with me in the community of a place that I love and I want to see grow, do better, and unite. To each and everyone who have supported me all throughout my life, and even right now, and this warrior right here, who have stuck with me down through the years and presented opportunities at Metro as well as throughout the city and have supported me on so many different levels. I am forever and eternally grateful. And to the youth, whatever your dream is, don't let nobody tell you you absolutely cannot. Everything that you need is inside of you. It was born inside of you. You make sure You make sure you connect yourself with the right people because it is very important. It's okay to say no. No is one of the most powerful and significant words in your vocabulary. And if you say no until you figure it out, it's okay. Because a lot of things and a lot of people going to require that you say yes, but you make people to respect your no. Your no is just as powerful and respected as your yes. And I thank you for everything.
Our next awardee is recognized for outstanding campus and community involvement that develops deep, and I mean deep relationships, mentors students from various backgrounds, and provides intensive academic support to help students reach their goals. Their efforts are not limited to advising or on-campus activities. They host tutor sessions and in-home visits to help first-generation, low-income, and other students successfully transition to college. Outside of MCC, they've been responsible for connecting student need to resources. Her colleagues state that she pushes people to be their very best and works to learn about individual students as much as possible. At MCC, we host an annual Diversity Matters book, film, and lecture series. Last year, we featured Jimmy Casa's book entitled Culturize. This recipient fully understands and implements Casa's directive to recognize students daily, value them for who they are, and share the opportunity for greatness to come to each student's life. She inspires students and her colleagues, creating a vivid learning environment here at MCC. In addition to today's recognition, she has received the Omaha JC's 10 Outstanding Young Omahans Award, the International Women's Day Award, and the Young, Black, and Influential Award. Congratulations to Raquel Henderson, MCC's Pathway Coordinator. Yeah, you. Who is recognized for her transformational leadership and community influence that builds relationships and connects needs to resources, fulfilling Dr. King's dream. Come on up. I would be remiss if I did not state, many of you know that there was a travesty that happened with an apartment complex in Northwest Omaha, and she and others with her leadership took it upon herself to connect resources to needs. In addition, she always posts job opportunities, scholarship opportunities, and more and more and more.
Caught off guard and surprise is an understatement. I'm listening to who this person, I'm like, dang, she is dope. She be doing it. Who is, I need to meet her. And it's me, but thank y'all, everybody. I just really love to be of service. It was implemented in me at a young age to be a cheerful giver and just to always be of service. It was really important to my mom. And so I just try to be that every single day. I love MCC and I love the students and I want to see everybody win. So that's it. I didn't prepare nothing. Thank y'all.
Our final awardee is a proud lifelong North Omaha resident. She attended Lake Elementary School and graduated from Central High School. She continued her education in pre-nursing at the University of Nebraska at Omaha and the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. A dedicated employee, she served for 40 years at one of the most elite phone companies in the United States, Northwestern Bell. Her community involvement is extensive. Since 1957, she's been a valued member of Ruth Chapter number 9 of the Order of the Eastern Star. Her leadership roles within the Order of the Eastern Star and the Daughters of Isis, which are service organizations, are vast to include, but not limited to, Worthy Matron, Patron of the Matrons and Patrons Council, Grand Associate Matron, Grand Worthy Matron, and she still holds the distinction of being the youngest elected Grand Worthy Matron of the Amaranthus Grand Chapter. She is a past president of the Lothrop Elementary School PTA and an honorary life member, past president of the Urban League Guild of Nebraska, secretary of the Urban League Board of Directors, and past treasurer of the NAACP Omaha branch, leader of Junior Achievement Group, past treasurer of the National Council of Urban League Guilds of New York, past president of the NAACP Omaha branch, commissioner for the Umoja District of the Mid-America Boy Scouts Council and United Negro College Fund, and executive loan officer for the United Way. She is currently a board member of the Central High School Alumni Association, the present secretary of the Charles Drew Health Center Board of Directors, a member of the New Era Women in White Missionary, and a member of My Sister's Keeper as a breast cancer survivor. She has also been a member of Pilgrim Baptist Church for over 50 years. She has been the recipient of numerous awards, but not limited to the Prince Hall Grand Lodge Meritorious Award, Urban League Guild of Nebraska Woman of the Year, National Urban League, Molly Moon Award, an annual recognition of Urban League Guild volunteers who have made extraordinary contributions to the growth and development of the National Urban League movement, Communication Workers of America Volunteer Award. Now, if you sit down with her, she would proudly share that she championed equal housing, fair employment, equal rights, and equal access to here in Omaha and to a local swimming pool, all by peacefully protesting. With Omaha once having segregated hotel accommodations, lodging for people of color was limited. The Reverend Paul Hayes of the National Baptist Convention was once her family's guest, and so impressed by the family's home-cooked meals and hospitality, inquired if they would host his friend, a Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1958. She and her family were honored to welcome into their home Reverend Dr. King, a leader of the movement in which she participated here in Omaha. Metropolitan Community College salutes Mrs. Patricia Ann Brown, to recognize her lifelong community impact, altruistic service, and dedication to civil rights advocacy to fulfill Reverend Dr. King's dream. And your family is in the rear to surprise you.
Hard for me to get up out of a low chair. But this is truly a surprise. My main goal was to raise my children and to serve my community. And locally, regionally, and nationally, I tried to do that to represent Omaha, Nebraska. And I am so honored today for receiving this honor. And I thank you so very, very much. I love Omaha. And I love everyone in it. I love my community. I love my city. my state, and I love America. So God bless America at these trying times, because we do have trying times, but we all need to stick together and make things happen for the better. Thank you so very, very much for this honor.
That was awesome. If you would please join me in giving a round of applause to our awardees. At this time, we would like to invite Ms. Kathy Tyree and Minister Montague back on stage to perform in honor of these stellar individuals who are helping to fulfill Dr. King's dream.
Well, they build their houses in preparation for the king, and they line their sidewalks with every sort of shiny thing. They will be surprised when they hear him say, "Take me to the alley, take me to the afflicted ones, take me to the lonely ones that somehow lost their way." They will hear him say, "I am your friend. Come unto my table and rest here in my garden. You will have a pardon." Doesn't this kind of sound like our recipients today? Yeah, yeah. Take me to the alley, take me to the afflicted ones, take me to the lonely ones that somehow lost their way. They will hear him say, "I am your friend. Come unto my table, yeah. Rest here in my garden, and you will have be surprised when they hear him saying, come unto my table, yeah, and just rest right here in my garden. You will have a party. Take me to the alley. Take me to the alley. Yeah. Take me to the alley.
Thank you so very much. What an honor to have such talented musicians in our community and as regular contributors to Metropolitan Community College, excuse me. And please watch your screens now as we welcome Dr. Marco Barker, Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, who will introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you. Kevin Powell is one of the most celebrated political, cultural, literary, and hip-hop voices in America. He is a poet, journalist, human and civil rights activist, filmmaker, a former two-time candidate for U.S. Congress in New York City, and the author of 15 books, including his newest poetry collection titled Grocery Shopping with My Mother. His life of service to others has included everything from relief work around September 11th and Hurricane Katrina tragedies, to annual clothing drives for the homeless, to voter education and voter registration, to violence prevention in all forms, including male violence against women and girls. His writings have appeared in a wide range of publications, including the New York Times, Esquire, The Guardian, HuffPost, Ebony, Essence, and The Washington Post. He has given speeches all across America in all 50 states, and has also lectured globally in places like Japan, Nigeria and West Africa, and the United Kingdom. In the spirit of Dr. King and all the many who made the civil rights movement happen, Kevin says simply, and I quote, "I do not care about fame, money, status, my resume, any of that. As long as there is hatred and violence and oppression and division and fear on this earth, my main concern is being an honest and consistent agent for change, and someone who cares deeply about people, about all people," end quote. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Powell.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Wow, God is good. God is good. Good afternoon to you all. Good day to you all. Thank you, Dr. Barker, for those the words and the energy and the spirit that you bring, my Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity brother. I want to just thank you all for having me. And I want to say I absolutely wish that I was there. I know because of COVID, we could not tell or predict what would be happening with this season that we're in. And I'm praying for all of you out there. I'm one of the many folks who actually got COVID, and I'm thankful that I'm still here because I had it pretty badly. But I just want to say thank you all for having me. I will get to Nebraska soon enough. I promise that. I want to thank you, Dr. Cynthia, Dr. President Randy, Brother James, Barbara Velasquez, all the folks who performed today, the awardees, Miss Butler, Ms. Henderson, Ms. Brown. I just really enjoyed listening to your words, listening to all of you all. I want to definitely shout out the technicians, Don and Joe and Sydney, who are making it possible for us who are virtual. And I want to say a few things briefly, but from our heart about this celebration of Dr. King. And I'm just so happy that this is your, I believe, 38th annual Dr. King celebration. This is such an important weekend for America and for the world. I'm actually going to be going straight to Atlanta after this session with you all to do a Dr. King event right there where he was born in Atlanta, Georgia. And as was said a few times as I was listening to folks' words, we are in very deep times in America, but I think we need to first celebrate the fact that we have a very beautiful and diverse group of people who are gathered here, both in person and what I'm looking at virtually on this Zoom screen. And I don't want to take that for granted. But I also want to encourage us, no matter how young or how old we are, to not forget that it's not just one day, the holiday, but it should be every day of our lives that we practice love, that we practice kindness, that we think about peace, that we think about forgiveness, that we think about healing. I think those things are important when we think about Dr. King. You know, for me, as was said by the bio, the introduction by Dr. Barker, I'm just committed to work and to people. I love people. I love all people, no matter how you identify yourselves. And I don't think there's any room in this world for the kind of hatred and violence and division, as he said in his introduction of me, that we see across our country in these last several years and what we see in the world. And so there's a few things I want to share with you all really quickly. I hope that we can have a conversation before I leave, some questions, some dialogue, because I think that's important, not just to have a speaker come in and talk and then leave, but a couple things that are on my heart. One, I didn't know who Dr. King really was when I was growing up. Part of that is how we're educated, you know, and I think that some of you all know what I'm talking about. We kind of just give people a one-dimensional frame. And so no different than how I learned about George Washington, for example, or Abraham Lincoln, which was barely anything. I just knew that Washington was the first president of the United States and that Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States. And honestly, between that, I couldn't even told you when I was growing up who really the other presidents were because it wasn't even emphasized. When we think about Dr. King, we've heard the word dream used a lot today, and we'll hear it throughout the next couple of days. We hear it every single year. You know, but I always ask people wherever I've traveled and wherever I've done Dr. King programs, how many of you out there have actually sat down and both listened to and read Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech in its entirety? And how many of you have done it or do it every single year? And then just as important, how many of us actually know anything about Dr. King's entire life? Like, what did he do and what did he say after August 28th, 1963, when he gave that phenomenal I Have a Dream speech? He lived 5 more years. And I think this is important to bring up because as we keep talking about this dream, I think we have to ask ourselves the question, well, what is this dream that we're talking about? What do we aspire to? Dreaming means something that we hope will happen, we want to make happen. And so I think about Dr. King, the fact that he was born on January 15th, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. We know that Dr. King was born into the Black elite of Atlanta, Georgia, that he came from very prominent folks who were leaders in the community as well, that Dr. King was very precocious as a child. Dr. King was someone who actually started college when he was only 15 years old, Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, again, where I'm heading right after this presentation. We know that Dr. King, being born in 1929, means that he was born into an America that was an apartheid state. There were signs that said for colors only and signs that said for whites only. We know that that had an effect on him even as a little boy. In fact, one of the famous stories about Dr. King is that he was on a bus with a chaperone going on a trip, and he could understand why they had to sit in the back of the bus. That is the racism that this country has had to deal with from the very beginning. What happened to indigenous people, who we call Native Americans, what happened to enslaved people, Black people in this country. And something that I think about all the time is even the fact that we're sitting here either in person or electronically via Zoom as people of diverse backgrounds, we should not take for granted, because if it wasn't for the work of Dr. King and Malcolm X, who was born in Omaha, Nebraska, shout out to Malcolm X, and Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer, because we can't just focus on the men. The women were absolutely critical to the civil rights movement. We need to say that, you know, we wouldn't even be in the space that we're in right now. I'm a first generation college student because of all the people who made the civil rights movement happen. We know that Dr. King went to Morehouse College, and by the time he was 26 years old, with postgraduate studies that included Philadelphia and Boston, he got his PhD in his mid-20s. He was a young man. We seem to think of him as an older person, but this is someone who didn't even live to 40. When he was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, he was only 39 years old. So this is someone who had a very short time frame. 26 years old in 1955 is when he was thrust into the spotlight when a woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama bus. And there was talk about what to do, and they decided to have a boycott, and Dr. King was designated as the leader of that boycott. He didn't seek this out. He was called, and any of y'all who come out of the Black church tradition know what I'm talking about, who come out of the Christian tradition know what I'm talking about, how you're called to something, and when you're called to something, you can't ignore it. And that was the beginning of the last 13 years of his life, 26 years old to 39 when he was assassinated. But look what happened in those 13 years, 1955 to 1968. Literally, it transformed this country. We lost a lot of people, women, men, Black folks, white folks, other folks, all identities. We lost a lot of people whose lives were sacrificed, literally, for some really basic things when you think about it. What we were talking about in the parts of the civil rights movement was, can I have the right to vote no matter what the color of my skin, no matter what the shape of my eyes, no matter what my identity is? Can I move about anywhere I want freely without getting killed simply because of who I am? Now, we're talking about this in the 50s and 60s, and we know just in the last couple of years, be it George Floyd in Minnesota or Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, we're still dealing with these horrific examples of hatred. And it's not just Black folks. We've seen it happen to Jewish folks at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. We've seen it happen to gay folks, queer folks, same gender loving folks in places like Colorado and Florida. We've seen it happen to Asian folks in places like Atlanta, where I'm going. We've seen it happen at a Black church in South Carolina, where ironically, the pastor of that church, where there was a massacre of people praying with a young white supremacist, was my cousin, And so in spite of everything that we've gone through in this country since Dr. King was killed, the election of the first Black president, first biracial, first multicultural president of the United States, as far as we know, Barack Obama, all these victories that have happened through the years, the Civil Rights Bill in 1965, the Voting Rights Act in 1964, we've seen significant changes. People like myself and Dr. Barker have had opportunities that our parents and grandparents couldn't even imagine because of the racism that existed before the Civil Rights Movement. And the Civil Rights Movement did not just benefit Black people. That's a lie. And that's a mistake if people think that. It benefited women. It benefited the LGBTQ plus community. It benefited disabled folks. It benefited Asian folks. It benefited indigenous people. It benefited Latinx people. And it benefited people who are Muslims, who are Jewish, who are agnostic, atheists. The Civil Rights Movement was about making America closer to the democracy that it claims and claimed to be. That's what the Civil Rights Movement was about. Let's really practice what we preach. Go back to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. He's basically saying that let's make this what we say it is, because the whole world is watching. And when I think about Dr. King and his life, I think about the Montgomery bus boycott, absolutely. I think about the things that happened in the 1960s. There were victories, like the Voting Rights Bill, like the Civil Rights Act, but there were losses as well. Things that didn't happen in places like Albany, Georgia, that backfired on Dr. King. I think about the fact that as the movement shifted from the South to the West Coast, California, to the northern cities around the country, how, say, for example, 1965, there was the Watts Rebellion, Los Angeles. Why did it happen? Because a Black person was killed by the police. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? This is 1965. And we know that Dr. King went out there. You can watch the footage on YouTube. It exists. And there are Black folks who are angry. And here's Dr. King, a Southern Black minister, trying to understand why this anger. This is why one of his most famous quotes to this day is, "A riot is the language of the unheard." A riot is the language of the unheard. And what Dr. King was saying essentially, y'all, is, hey, just because you can get anywhere, sit anywhere on the bus, you can't ride the bus if you don't have any money. Just because you can now sit at a lunch counter What if you don't have any money to buy a sandwich, a hamburger? And so he began to realize post the I Have a Dream speech, post the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act, post the explosion of what people called riots or rebellions in places like Los Angeles, that there was an economic issue that also had to be dealt with. Okay, we got the voting rights piece. We got some legislation around citizenship that should have been in place after the Civil War, 1865 and the 1860s. We had to wait 100 years after the Civil War to get these things in place. And we're still fighting for it, as y'all know, in different ways. But he was like, there's got to be something around economic justice. And so I'm saying to you all, when I think about the work of Dr. King, one of the mistakes we make is to get caught up in just seeing it as three things: the Montgomery bus boycott, 1955, I Have a Dream speech, 1963, and Then He's Dead, 1968. We do Dr. King and his life work and the work of all those folks who made it possible for us to be here. If we don't take the time to slow down, not just during the holiday weekend every January, but on a regular basis, actually learn basic American history, which includes the Civil Rights Movement, which includes Black history. Black history is American history. Civil rights history is American history. And I think that when I think of Dr. King, that's one of the most critical things. We've got to read. We've got to study. We've got to travel. We've got to know these things. I'm going to tell y'all something. Two things stuck out to me in my travels abroad, Dr. Barker and everyone out there listening. A few years ago, I had the incredible honor on the behalf of our government, the State Department, to go to Japan to give speeches in 2013 around the 50th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech. And what blew my mind as I traveled from community to community, school to school, high schools, grade schools, and colleges in the country, the nation of Japan, is how the Japanese knew more about American history and the Civil Rights Movement and Dr. King than many people I had encountered as my fellow Americans. I also had the opportunity, the great honor of doing work in the nation of Wales, which is a part of the United Kingdom. There's Wales, there's England, there's Scotland, there's Northern Ireland. That makes up the quote unquote United Kingdom. I'm in Wales to celebrate the great Welsh writer, Dylan Thomas. And as I'm traveling through the country of Wales, I noticed that there were words in English and there were words in Welsh. And as I looked at this over and over again, I just asked a simple question: why is that? And what was said to me blew my mind as an American, as an African-American, as a Black person who was from a totally different part of the world. The Welsh folks said to me, the reason why you see this embracing and holding on of Welsh culture is because we saw what Dr. King and others did in America during the Civil Rights Movement, and it had such a profound impact on us. We demanded that we hold on to our identities, that we continue to know who we are as well. I was like, wow. Wow. Now I want y'all to think about that for a second. So when we think about Dr. King, it ain't just about having a dream. It's about action. If you go back and listen to the I Have a Dream speech and read it, and I'm recommending strongly to do both. He says a few things that I want to underline. One, he uses the term police brutality twice in that speech. I'm not making it up. Read it for yourselves. Listen to it for yourselves. Number two, he's talking about a form of reparations when he says, you know what? We've been given a check that has been marked insufficient funds. There's something that needs to be repaired here, because clearly it's not been fair what has happened to my people, Black people, who were enslaved and then the victims of segregation. It's like having a race, a marathon. I'm a runner, y'all. I'm training for my third New York City marathon as we speak. Imagine I start at the 15-mile mark, knowing that it's only 11 miles to go in the marathon, and I'm telling the rest of y'all, just catch up with me. How's that even possible without any kind of support? It's not. I got to go to college because of a civil rights program created in my home state of New Jersey called the Educational Opportunity Fund, because it was understood I was one of the many people. My mama has an 8th grade education. My grandmother couldn't read or write, and no one in my family before that had even gone past high school. That's what the civil rights movement did. I would not have 15 books. There's no way I would have traveled the way I've traveled if it wasn't for the opportunities that were made possible by the civil rights movement.
And so when I think about Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, he says in that speech, go back to Alabama, go back to Mississippi. In other words, we got work to do. Freedom just doesn't happen magically. Justice doesn't just happen magically. Democracy doesn't just happen magically. Love does not just happen magically. You have to do the work on a consistent basis. It has to become a part of your DNA. What we see happening in these times is so much foulness. I'm going to say to y'all, I'm African-American, but I don't see how anyone can watch what's been happening with immigrant people as they've been put on buses and shipped all around the country like they're just savages, inhuman, not human beings. We treat animals better, not caring about their lives at all. Meanwhile, we'll turn around and say hypocritically, oh, America was built on the backs of immigrants. And we know that's only half true because America was built on the backs of free labor called slavery and immigrants and the land of indigenous people. Let's be clear about that. But think about how we're treating immigrant people. Think about how we're treating people who might be different than us. The laws that are popping up around the country telling you what you can and cannot talk about, what you can and cannot teach at centers of education. Basically telling people all over again, based on your identity or identities, you should just become invisible. You don't matter. Are y'all with me out there? Are y'all with me out there? I want y'all to unmute for a second. I want to hear y'all. I want to see y'all. Can I see y'all if you're on camera? And can I hear y'all for a second? Please. I'm saying to you all, with all due love and respect, we do this every year. We celebrate Dr. King. We talk about the dream. We talk about love. And with a few exceptions, many of us just go back to either being silent and saying nothing and doing nothing, or business as usual. I don't like this person because they're this. I don't like that person because they're that. And I'm saying to you all, man, we are in a very critical state in this country's history, a very critical time. It's profound to me that I can walk outside my apartment building right now and just be murdered because of who I am. Just because. No one cares about the books. No one cares about the resume. No one cares about any of that stuff. But just because of how I look. It's profound to me that if you identify as a woman, how your life is basically reduced to being an object of sex and abuse and rape for people, and not respected, not regarded as a full human being equal to everyone else. Or if you happen to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-gender conforming, how you're treated. Or if you're disabled, how you're treated. If you're Asian, how you're treated. If you're Latinx, how you're treated. If you're indigenous, how you're treated. You know, I could go on and on and on. I'm saying to you all, we've got to decide for ourselves in the spirit of Dr. King. Am I, for the rest of my life, from this point on, going to be a bridge builder or a bridge destroyer? For the rest of my life, from this point on, am I going to practice love or am I going to practice hate and indifference? From this point on, am I going to do something? It shouldn't just be the 3 women who got acknowledged for their awards today, because what we often see in our communities, I'm sure they'll tell you that I'm telling the truth, is always a few people who do all the work for everyone else. Even that should be unacceptable. That should be unacceptable. And I'm saying to you all, we've got, what Dr. King said, some difficult days ahead. He said this in his last speech, April 3rd, 1968, his mountaintop speech. We've got some difficult days ahead because we do. Because until we make it an effort, an honest effort to, one, learn history of this country, but also the history of ourselves. Go back to the I Have a Dream speech for a second, y'all. Think about the part of the speech when Dr. King says, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will join hands and sing in the words of the Negro spiritual. Slow down for a second, Kevin Powell. He said, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will join hands and sing in the words of the Negro spiritual. What he was doing, in my humble opinion, was acknowledging the beautiful diversity of this place we call America. But you better understand who Jews are and Gentiles are and Protestants are and who Catholics are and who Negroes or Black people are, who all of us are, because how can you come to the table of the human family, of the human race, if you don't even know who you are and what you're bringing to the table? And if you don't have the courage, the willingness also to learn about people who are different than you. That was Dr. King's challenge. And one of his other challenges was his last book. Where do we go from here? Question mark. Community, which is the beloved community he talked about a lot, or chaos. And what we've seen the last few years is a lot of chaos. Be it the January 6th insurrection, how George Floyd was murdered on camera. Literally, we saw how the life sucked out of him for over 9 minutes. What we just saw happen, as I said a moment ago, at that LGBTQ plus club in Colorado, those folks were bothering nobody. That was supposed to be their safe space away from the homophobia and the transphobia and the hatred. And so I believe, in the spirit of Dr. King, and I'm gonna end it here, that love's got to become a practice. And we got to struggle to love. We got to struggle to love ourselves. We got to struggle to love other people. I don't believe that love and violence go together. I used to think when I was younger, age-wise and younger emotionally, Dr. King, I'm like, he's mad corny. What's up with all this peace stuff? But he's right. I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to live in a world where there's just nonstop violence. I want to live in a world where we have over 300 million people in America and we have over 300 million guns. So everywhere I go now, I look for the exit because I'm worried about someone pulling out a gun and just start shooting. No matter where it is. It could be the suburbs, rural, the hood. It don't matter. It does not matter because we have become conditioned, as Dr. King talked about in a speech he gave about Vietnam on April 4th, 1967. He said, we've become the biggest purveyors of violence in the world. He's talking about America. We believe in violence. We celebrate violence. We worship violence. And it was violence that took Dr. King's life, a person who was about peace. We need to think about that for a second. And so I also think about, what kind of person do I want to be going forward? And I'm not just talking about violence, physical, shooting people, stabbing people, punching people, raping people, but I'm also talking about, do we violently have negative ideas about each other? Do we talk to each other in ways that are disrespectful, that are not kind, that are not rooted in kindness? I want us to think about that as we talk about Dr. King and his legacy. You know, do we really care about other people? The other day, y'all, I saw a video on social media that was so disturbing to me. Some of y'all may have seen it, where a man, an elderly man, started water hosing a homeless woman on the streets of San Francisco simply because he didn't want her in front of the door that may or may not have been his property at all. And just the cruelty of that, as we see homelessness explode throughout the country, including New York, where I live, nonstop homeless, you know, including many people who are veterans who served this country, who are sleeping on the streets because we've turned our backs on them. When I think about Dr. King, I think about poverty. What was the last thing he was trying to organize at the end of his life? A poor people's campaign, a poor people's campaign, a poor people's campaign. The reason why there's so much homelessness in our country more than ever is because it's become more difficult to manage financially. Things have gone up, but the cost of living hasn't gone up. Students going to college because they're told that's the right thing to do, but then they many of us end up in large debt. And so we've got to figure out some solutions together, because Dr. King's work was not finished, y'all. His life was cut short, but here we are. And the question people will ask 25 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, y'all who were alive in 2023, what did you do as you saw all this happening around you? What did you do to make a difference? And it's got to be rooted in love. It's got to be rooted in love. it's got to be rooted in love. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Kevin, for prioritizing your time for this important celebration for Metropolitan Community College. Thank you for your powerful role as a creative leader in the United States and beyond, and for your tireless efforts to fulfill Dr. King's dreams. We do have time to ask a few questions because Mr. Powell is willing to take those from us. Everyone, if you will look in the center of your table, you will see note cards, and there are also some pens as well. If you would, please write your questions on the note card, and if you hold it up, Mrs. Barbara Velasquez is here and she will grab that from you. In addition to that, those who are viewing via Zoom, you can also enter your questions in the chat as well. Mr. Powell, I do have a few questions here for you. The first one is this: what steps do you recommend for students who want to get involved in the fight for Dr. King's dream?
Do it, jump in. But I think that if y'all don't remember anything else I said today, hashtag, especially for students out there, no matter how old or young you are, hashtag read, study, travel, hashtag read, study, travel. You know, Dr. King was brilliant. Dr. King was brilliant. He wasn't a perfect human being. He had a lot of contradictions, a lot of conflicts, a lot of internal conflicts. But this is also someone who could write down a whole speech and then get up and leave the speech literally in the chair in the church pew and just talk off his head. You know what I mean? You can't do that if you don't read. You can't do that if you don't study. You can't do that if you don't travel. And I think that if we're serious about getting involved in community in any way, you have a responsibility to know, well, what happened before me? You know, I'm not just talking about the civil rights movement. There was the anti-apartheid movement in the 1980s. Obviously, we've seen Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movements happen in the last couple of years. We need to become students of history. We need to know what has happened to help change things in our country and other countries around the world. And we've got to travel. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made, Mr. Hawthorne, I was poor, very poor, but I didn't get on a plane until I was 24 years old, half my life ago. But once I started traveling, my brain went, even if you can't afford to get on a plane, or you're afraid of flying. And I do believe fear can become a prison. Just get in the car, or get in a Greyhound bus and go to the next state, couple states you've never been to before. You know, don't be like me when I was coming up as a young person, as a student, where I was born and raised in New Jersey. I went to college in New Jersey. All I knew was New Jersey. I barely went anywhere else. You know, how can you call yourself an American if you don't know anything about America? You've never even seen at least parts of the country. And so I think that we have to be students for the rest of our lives, and understanding that leadership means that you take very seriously. Leaders got to read. Leaders have to study, you know, and you got to pick up every skill set possible. What did I get for when I was in college? I learned how to speak in public. I learned how to run meetings. I learned how to take notes. I learned how to be a secretary, how to be a treasurer. You know, I learned how to do press releases. I learned how to do a budget. I learned how to write proposals. You know, I learned how to organize rallies, protests, events like this. I did everything I could because I was like, there's no job. I swept the floors. I cleaned the table, whatever it was. Excuse me. I was like, I need to learn how to do the things that are functional to contribute to my community, that will be helpful to my community.
Thank you for that. Mr. Powell, I have another question here. What suggestion?
Just Kevin, please.
Oh, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
What suggestion do you have to help engage our youth and to help them understand that we need them?
Listen to young people, listen to young people, listen to young people. One of the worst things that older adults can do, and I've seen a lot of this happen, is we'll talk about young people, but we never talk with or listen to young people. Very dangerous. That's saying to me that you're an older adult who really doesn't want to hear from young people at all. You just want to hear yourself talk. You know what I mean? You want to tell young people what to do. And I think you got to listen to young people. Like, I think we should do events like this where it's just young people talking. When I say young, someone who's 35 and under, 30 and younger, 40 and under, you know, in their 20s, teenagers, preteens, and just let them speak. And don't try to censor them. If they speak a certain kind of way, don't try to correct their grammar, how they speak. Don't try to say, well, don't hurt. No, just let them talk. Because that's how the trust begins to build, you know, if you listen to their voices. And then you can formulate it. I'm going to go back to what I was saying about Dr. King. It's on YouTube, y'all. Go watch the footage of him in Watts, 1965. He's sitting there and listening. They were saying all kinds of stuff to him. One person even said, "Get out of here, Dr. King. We don't want you." Part of being a leader, no matter what your leadership role is not having such a massive ego that you can't take constructive criticism and you don't know how to listen to people who might be younger than you, different than you. Listen to young people, and they'll tell you what they need.
Thank you for that, Kevin.
Yes,
Next
sir.
question. As a father of 5 boys and 2 girls, how can I lead my children toward MLK's vision?
Well, I think the human vision, which is an extension of Dr. King, because we don't know where he would have gone after 1968. Well, my extension of it is the boys need to learn how to be loving, emotionally available, vulnerable, free-speaking men. And if they happen to be heterosexual, cisgender men, they can't just talk about sports, women, and money. They got to be able to talk about everything. And they have to respect women and girls as their equals, as their equals, as their equals, because women and girls are their equals, are their equals, are their equals. That's how I think males should be developed. And they need to be taught that violence is not the solution for any kind of emotional stress or conflict, that there's other ways to deal with it. Because unfortunately, a lot of us who grew up as boys, as men, have been taught, and myself included, I've written about it very honestly, I've spoken about it very honestly, violence was the solution for everything. Aggressiveness was the solution for everything. Ego was the solution for everything. Competition was the solution for everything. No. We need well-rounded folks who identify as being males. And also part of that, teach them not to be sexist, teach them not to be homophobic, teach them not to be transphobic, not to condemn people who might be different than them. And with the women, the girls, they are equals to anyone in this world. And that means that their education cannot just be male-centered and male-dominated the way most of our educations are. I was an A student, y'all, K through 12, A student. Finished 3rd in my graduating class for grammar school. I won an English award and math award when I got to high school. But if you ask me what did I know about the history of women and girls to the building of America, nothing. Nothing. Betsy Ross sewed a flag, Rosa Parks, that's it. Guess what that makes me? Someone who's completely ignorant about half the country's population and half the world's population who identifies women and girls. And so I think that what do we need to do? Teach history, and women and girls have contributed to math, science, history, social studies, everything. And women and girls should be empowered as much as we try to empower men and boys. And they need to be told the truth about sexism, just like people of color should be told the truth about racism. It's real, alive. Here's the history of it, and here's how you can navigate things.
Thank you for that, Kevin. The current state of affairs in the United States is frightening. What can everyday individuals do to bring unity and equality to the work of our government?
Well, imagine how indigenous people felt when European settlers, quote unquote, came and committed genocide against them. That was frightening. Imagine how African people felt, Black people felt, when someone came to their native land, Africa, the continent of Africa, and kidnapped them, stole them, put them on ships, didn't tell them where they were going, and they had to suffer for 250 years at least as enslaved people. That was frightening. Imagine how it felt for folks who were, Asian, say Chinese Americans, who were forced to do things like build railroads and place railways in parts of this country and still not treated as full citizens. Think about how women have felt. Think about how queer folks have felt. Think about how Jewish folks have felt, how Italian folks have felt, how Irish folks have felt. We can go on down a line of things. And so when has it never not been frightening for someone somewhere? I think what we need to do is say to ourselves, again, how do we deal with this in the past, in our history? What lessons can we take from that and remix, as we say in hip hop, to these present times so we can steel ourselves, our backs? There's nothing wrong with being afraid. There's nothing wrong with being nervous. But at some point, I think we dishonor and disrespect and spit on the graves of folks who sacrificed for us to be here, to just become paralyzed with fear where we don't think we can do anything. I mean, my gosh, what drives me, y'all? My mama has an 8th grade education. She raised me on welfare, food stamps, government cheese, poverty, ugly poverty. And we know that poverty is a form of violence. Poverty is a form of violence. This is why Dr. King was organizing against poverty, the Poor People's Campaign, at the end of his life. My mama did not allow all that to stop her. You know what she said? I got this son. I got to raise him by myself. I got to figure this out, and I'm going to have to give to him what I wish I would have for myself, including a love of learning in school and education. That's why I'm sitting here in front of y'all right now. Imagine if my mother would have been paralyzed by what was happening around her with fear. Doesn't mean she wasn't scared. Can you imagine being a young Black woman or young woman of any background? You're a single mother. You have no help whatsoever. You have limited education, limited skills. How would you not be afraid? But she had to dig inside of herself, her ancestral history, the spirit of the God that she believed in, and say, in spite of everything, I know I can save this child's life so he can have a life that I couldn't even have for myself. And that's what she did.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Kevin. So we definitely want to thank you for your words today, Kevin, and thank you for the inspiration. At this time, we will afford you an opportunity to provide your final thoughts for our audience today.
Well, I said it in the chat here. I love all of you. Thank you kindly for having me. I can't wait to get to Omaha, Nebraska in person. We've been doing this Zoom thing for almost 3 years, y'all. I'm zoomed out, and but I'm really inspired by what I heard from you all there in Omaha, Nebraska. Just know that I heard y'all loud and clear, and what really touched my heart was the spiritual beliefs that I heard, and the humility that I heard, including from the award winners, and the fact that in spite of everything, we still have love in our hearts. That's the true spirit of Dr. King, in spite of everything, because what we don't want to become, what I don't want to ever become again, I've been in my past lives, is in spite of what's been happening, for me to become the ugliness that I'm fighting against. I do not, and we should not become the ugliness that's in this world. I love y'all. Thank you.
You, our audience members, thank you for sharing your time with us today. Thanks to all the staff and to the Institute for Culinary Arts for helping us reinstitute this in-person and hybrid celebration. Before you leave, we have one final musical piece performed by Miss Kathy Tyree and Minister Ananias Markey Montague. May the rhythms remind you, in the words of Dr. King, the need for our vigorous and positive action toward his dream. Thank you.
We are like children, we're painted on canvases, picking up shades as we go. We start out with gesso, brushed on by people we know. Watch your technique as you go. Step back and admire my view. Can I pick the colors I choose? Do I have some say what you use? Can I get some green with my blues? We're part of the pigment of paint that is put upon. Our stories are told by our hues. Like Motley and Bearden, these masters of peace and life, layers of colors and time. Step back and admire my view. Can I pick the colors I choose? Do I have some say what you use? Can I get some green with my blues? We are like children, we're painted on canvases. Ananias Montague, y'all. Yeah. We are like children, we're painted on canvases, picking up shades as we go. We're brushed on with gesso, brushed on by people we know. Watch your technique as you go. Step back and admire my view. Can I pick the colors I choose? Do I have some say what you use? Can I get some green with my blues? We're part of a pigment of paint that is put upon. Our stories are told by our hues. With motley and bidden, these masters of peace and life, layers of color and time. Step back and admire my view. Can I pick the colors I choose? Yeah. And do I have some say what you use? Yeah. And can I get some green with my blues? Yeah. We are like children, we're painted on canvases. Admire my view. You admire my view. Bless you, Dr. Gooch.
Again, thank you so much for attending this year. This concludes our program. Have a beautiful day. Thanks.